Alright, fam, it's your boy Pop Pop. I'm gonna get right to it. This DoD directive of September 27, 2024, DoD 5420.01, where they suspend posse comitatus, and the directive allows U.S. servicemen to fire on protesters with lethal force. It's not saying rioters now, it's saying protesters are allowed to be fired on with lethal force. Now, this is September 27, 2024, of the Biden administration ramping things up to take care of any malcontents. But it reminds me of the book of Esther. Okay, there were two men in the book of Esther. One was the king Ahasuerus' right hand man Haman, and another man, a Jew named Mordecai, who would not bow down to Haman. Haman gets all twisted, and he desires to have Mordecai hung from a gallows. But in the end of the story, Haman is one that gets hung from his own gallows. And I believe that this directive, DoD 5420.01, that the Biden administration put in place to take care of any Trumpsters, is going to come back and bite them in the ass. In any case, let me see. Esther 3. After a time, did King Ahasuerus promote Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Then the king's servants which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, Why do you transgress the king's laws? Now it came to pass, when they spoke daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then Haman was full of wrath. Excuse me. Then he thought to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. In the first month, that is, the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is, the lot, before Haman from day to day, and from month to month, in the 12th month, which is the month Adar. I believe Nisan, they consider that the first month, but we would consider Nisan April. So, and Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to put up with them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have charge of the business, and bring it into the king's treasures. The king took his ring from his hand, gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said to Haman, the silver is given unto thee, the people also, to do with them as it seems good to you. Then the king's scribes called the 13th day of the first month, and there was written, according to all that Haman had commanded, unto the king's lieutenants and governors that were over every province, to the rulers of every people and province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, in the name of the king Ahasuerus, it was written and sealed with the king's ring. Now, at that point, the proclamation cannot be undone. Once it is sealed with the king's signet ring, it becomes law. And the letters were sent by post unto all the king's promises to destroy, kill, and cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is a month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey, kind of like what the Germans did on Kristallnacht. The copy of the writing for commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace, and the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. So, because Ahasuerus was considered a relatively good king. KJV, Esther 4. All right. So, Esther 4, when Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai tore his clothes, put on burlap with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and cried with a loud and bitter cry, and came before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. In every province whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning upon the Jews, fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maids, this is Queen Esther, Esther's maids and her chamberlains came out, and they told her what was going on. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, for she was a Jew. She sent raiment of clothes to Mordecai to take away his sackcloth, but he will not put it on. Then called Esther to Hatach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend unto her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. So Hatach went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city which before the king's gate. Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and the sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. He also gave him a copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king, make supplication unto him, and to make requests before him for her people. And Hatach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again Esther spoke unto Hatach, gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come into the king in the inner court who is not called, there is one law of his to put them to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out his golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king in these 30 days. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the rest of the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then there shall enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther bade them return to Mordecai this answer. Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day, that I and my maidens will fast likewise. And so will I go unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way, and did all according to what Esther had commanded him. Esther 5, KJV. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her most royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house over against the king's house. And the king sat upon his royal throne in the house over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she had obtained favor in his sight, the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, What can I do for you, Queen Esther? What is thy request? It shall be given unto thee, even to half the kingdom. And Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for them. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther has said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. The king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is your petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even half the kingdom, it shall be performed. Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and will do to tomorrow as the king has said. Then went Haman forth that day joyful with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, he stood not up nor moved for him. He was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. Haman told them of the glory of his riches, the multitude of his children, all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he advanced above the princess and servants of the king. Haman said moreover, Yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she prepared but myself, and tomorrow I am invited unto her with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate. Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, Let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak unto the king, so that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thy merrily with the king unto the banquet. And this thing pleased Haman, so he caused the gallows to be built. Okay? KJV, Esther 6. All right. So on that night the king could not sleep. He commanded the book of records be brought to him, and they were read before the king. It was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on King Ahasuerus. And the king said, What honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, Well, actually nothing has been done for him. And the king said, Who is in this court? Now Haman was come to the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servants said unto him, Behold, Haman stand in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, What shall be done unto the man whom the king delight to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart that the king was talking about him. So Haman answered the king, For the man whom the king delight to honor, let royal apparel be brought to the king, and put on the man the horse that the king rides, and the crown which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal whom the king delight to honor, and bring him on horseback through the streets of the city, to proclaim before them, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then the king said to Haman, Make haste, take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, that sit at the king's gate, and let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the streets of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delights to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hasted to his house, mourning and having his head covered. When Haman told Zeresh his wife and all of his friends everything that had happened, then his wise men and Zeresh his wife said to him, If Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou wilt not prevail against him, but surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, the king's chamberlains hastened to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. So, interesting story. KJV, Esther 7. All right. So the king and Haman drew to the banquet that Esther the queen had prepared. And the king said unto Esther the second day at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted unto thee, and what is thy request? And it shall be performed even to the half of the kingdom. Now this is on the second day of the banquet, after the king has been given wine and food and all that other stuff. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please thee, let my life be given me and my petition and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain and perish. But if we had been sold for bondsmen and bondswomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king, being confused, answered and said to Esther, Who is he, and where is he that presumes in his heart to do this evil? Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. And then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went to the palace garden, and Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine. Haman was fallen upon the bed where Esther was. Then the king said, Will he force the queen also before me in my own house? As the word went out of king's mouth, they covered Haman's head. And Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, Look, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman has made for Mordecai, who has spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai, and the king's wrath was pacified. So my point in all of this is, it appears that, again, the Biden administration had this DOD Directive 5220.01, September 27th of 2024, to use lethal force against protesters, aka Trumpsters, all right? And since that law is still binding, it's still in effect, I believe that it's going to come back and bite them in the ass as far as Trump regaining power in not only the House, but the Senate, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and all that other stuff. Now, I'm not gloating. I'm not one of those that's gloating. I'm just saying it's very interesting how this stuff is playing out and how history seems to be repeating itself. Pop out.